I guess all the parties have essentially concluded, because for most of December, many people have gone to corporate parties or families' homes, especially in and around Christmas. There's been a lot of gatherings. I think one will always appreciate that going to gatherings, one has to act a little bit differently. So if one is within a corporate setting or in a family setting or in a social setting, one has to conduct oneself in a way so as not to give offense, and in fact to demonstrate one's gratitude and one's courtesy. Well, in 1922, Emily Post wrote her great book, Etiquette, because many people had questions. How am I to relate to my boss? How am I to conduct myself at this gathering? How am I to conduct myself when I visit grandma? And so etiquette is always very, very important about how one should show courtesy to others so as not to offend anybody and not to hurt anyone's feelings, because of various faux pas. Now, I had to learn this personally. Now, when I began my theological studies for the seminary to become a priest in 2003, we had a 1-week orientation week. And so for 3 nights, we actually had Miss Manners classes, etiquette classes. Because for us, we never realized how people view a priest. And I guess I kind of overlooked being little and overlooking the stature that a priest has. And therefore, he has to uphold himself in a particular way. For instance, this Miss Manners had told us priests are notorious for not responding to invitations. And all of a sudden, they'll just stop at someone's house and, oh, I forgot to send the invitation. So it really puts the host or hostess in an awkward position. She also said the importance of writing thank you notes if someone has done us well or invited us to a gathering or even to receive a gift of some kind. We were even taught when going to formal dinners which forks and other utensils to use, which glasses to use, and even how to eat soup properly. And another great thing that we were reminded about is when attending someone's home for a dinner, bring some kind of gift. Whether it's a bottle of wine, flowers, dessert, and it doesn't have to be much, but just to show a courtesy to the person and family who's hosting you. That's prudent. So it's a reminder of sharing gifts is a courtesy we give to the host or hostess. Likewise with us, sharing our divine gifts is the greatest courtesy we can give to God. Now, for the past several weeks, we've been reading about Jesus' infancy. And so both in the Gospels of Luke and Mark, we recount how Jesus came to earth to be born. Now, both have subtle differences, but for the most part, both Matthew and Luke use the infancy narratives to kind of bridge from the Old Testament into the new covenant that Jesus gives, as well as preparing the reader for Christ's future. And ultimately, the future is that God gives good news. Some people reject that good news, and some people accept the good news. So who rejects it? Well, it's a paradox. That as the wise men go to encounter Jesus in Bethlehem, they go to visit the King of the Jews. And so they make their courtesy visit, and Emily Post will be very happy about that, to the king, chief priests, and scribes. And the response is, they're frightened. And ultimately they would be the ones, because once the wise men go another route, how do we continue reading? Herod is very upset, and he wants to kill all the children of the age of 2 to get rid of this king of the Jews, which also is a reminder that the king of Egypt wanted to kill all the Hebrew children, especially Moses. So who accepts it? Strangely, like the shepherds went to Bethlehem in Luke's Gospel, the wise men go and accept this good news. So scholars would say that they probably were astrologers, these wise men, who traveled most likely from Iran, or what was then called Persia. And it was probably a distance of about 1,000 to 1,500 kilometers. So they're going a good distance, following this star. And so the very fact that they are following is that they want the good news, and they're willing to travel and spare no expense to go and to encounter the King of the Jews. And so when the star stops, what's their reaction? In contrast to King Herod's response and all of Jerusalem, they're frightened. They are overwhelmed with joy, are the wise men. And Emily Post would again be very happy because they share gifts with the newborn child. 3 gifts, in fact, which again foreshadow Jesus' future, because the Gospel of Matthew, the first 2 chapters, the infancy narratives, are really the Gospel in miniature. And so 3 gifts are presented: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, gold is good, okay, you can use that, but it's much more symbolic for St. Matthew. Gold represents kingship. So this is the newborn King of the Jews. The second gift that they bring is frankincense. Now, frankincense is used for rituals to worship God or the gods. So why would frankincense be necessary for a child? Again, to remind the reader that this is God. This newborn King of the Jews is God. He's divine. The third gift he's given is myrrh, which seems the most absurd of the 3, for myrrh is an embalming fluid to prepare a body for its burial. And again, for the reader, it foreshadows this little child's future. That even though he's a newborn child with lots of life, he will die, but ultimately to bring the fullness of his good news to the whole world. And so the people who reject the good news, and we see the contrast of the people who accept it. And again, it foreshadows the future, because at the end of Matthew's Gospel, Matthew 28, Jesus will tell his disciples, go and make disciples of all nations, not just the Jewish people, all nations, baptizing them and teaching them all that I've commanded you, and know that I'm with you always. So the wise men were very good in being very courteous to this newborn king, for they shared their gifts. Now what about us? We receive divine gifts. The virtue of faith, we've accepted that. We were baptized, and today we'll receive the Eucharist. What a remarkable gift. And how do we receive it? I think we should receive it in the way that both the wise men in Matthew's Gospel and the shepherds in Luke's Gospel did. With joy. They were happy. It was a great thing. And it's so much easier to share things when we're happy than when we're frightened, as King Herod, the chief priest, and the scribes were. And I think ultimately the Lord's going to ask each one of us, well, how have you shared the gifts I've given you? Now, the shepherds didn't have much except their time and and the message they got from the angels. And in turn, the Holy Family was overwhelmed, and even Mary pondered these words in her heart. And the gifts that the wise men give were a demonstration of their gratitude that the newborn King has been born to us. So how do we share our gifts? And I think we have to do so in the corporate, the business situations, family situations, social situations that we're in. I think always to do, as Emily Post would have it, courteously and with tact. And I think ultimately we have to do it because we're people of joy. In fact, at the end of the Mass, we'll be dismissed. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. Well, we've got this remarkable gift because we may be the only gospel that anyone ever reads. The gospel in miniature, as the infancy narratives, the first couple of chapters of Luke and Matthew do. So we know what the history is. We know what's going to happen, that Christ will triumph. And so, to share that good news with those who are frightened by life, for those who are overwhelmed, for those who've never heard the gospel before, people who may reject it, people who've rejected it in the past but want to hear it anew, because we do it with the joy that the shepherds and also the wise men do. And I think as we reflect as a parish and the whole church with this year of mercy, well, it's to bring the tenderness, the joy of the gospel to places in the world who've never encountered it. And so we have to share these gifts, because ultimately the Lord's going to ask us, what have you done with the gifts I've given you? And so the most courteous thing we can do for the Lord is to share these divine gifts with those that we meet, in social settings, business settings, and even in our families. So I've learned the importance of etiquette. Now you may, if I come and visit you, or if I don't do anything courteous, please let me know, because I'm sure Emily Post or Miss Manners or whatever etiquette teachers there are, it's always good to learn a lesson. I think it's ultimately to show gratitude for those who do good to us. And so this week, let us show the gratitude that God has done for us. He has saved us. He has given us the gifts of His mercy and love. And in turn, let us show this courtesy to the Lord by sharing our divine gifts with those we will meet this week.